Hello and welcome to the Colts Cover-2 Podcast. I am Joel A. Erickson. I am joined by Nate Atkins from a broom closet. Where are
Essentially,
you? Where are you
I
specifically?
am basically in a broom closet at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So I've been
There's a
here.
window. Can broom closets have a window?
Yeah. See, I can probably give you a tour of this whole little office. Here we go. Listen, video. Just saw the tour. It is about the size of a closet, though.
If
I'm lucky I found it. I was just looking for a quiet place to record because this isn't really a place for Colts podcast. Believe it or not, it's normally a place for racing.
if uh if if you aren't watching on video, if you're just listening to us on audio, uh what Nate just showed me, like when I say window, that's not really accurate. It's like the width of his head. The,
Yep,
the window.
it is a sliver.
It's a very small window. It's a very small room.
It looks like an interrogation room.
It does. It does. I was about to say it looks like a place you would try to keep Jason Bourne and fail miserably.
Yeah.
Um,
Some cop's gonna walk in here and sit with me for 5 hours. It's like that kind of room.
and ask you why you want to talk to Kyle Larson.
Yes. That's what
Nate
I've been
Nate
doing
has
today.
been Nate
Waiting
has
all
been trying
day.
to talk to Kyle Larson all day, and the rain will
Yeah.
not cooperate.
No. So here we are. We got to fill the time somehow. So why don't we talk about the
I
Colts?
I don't have anything that fun going on. I mean, the schedule is going to come out later, and I will be dealing with all of that. But the most exciting thing that's happened to me today is that a dog popped out of a bush on my bike ride and scared the waste out of me.
Did you hit it?
No. But I will say this, like, you know how normally when you're on a bike and the dog chases you, like you have a lot of advance notice because the dog is barking
Yep.
the whole way. This dog, like, he he waited. He waited until I was even with him and then pounced out of the bushes like a tiger and
Wow.
barked.
Dang. He's got predator instincts.
He's an advanced hunter. Um, luckily, he wasn't mean. He was just, loose. But yeah, no, I'm still recovering. I'm still recovering from
Yeah.
the fear of it. I was like, that's what I get. That's what I get for waiting this long. Because I waited until the rain in Fishers, where I am, had cleared off enough that I could ride my bike to the gym, and the dog was like, "That's perfect. That's perfect. You're right in my." And then actually about a quarter mile down the road, I saw his owner looking for him and was able to say, "Hey, I know where your dog is," and pointed him back to go find his dog
There you
because
go. Like
um,
you're doing the same thing today I am here in different ways. We're rooting for
yeah,
no crashes, no
yeah,
wrecks.
yeah. Well, it's kind of you're kind of in a weird spot too because you want to get out and help the dog get back to its house, but like the dog also has already seen. I think when you're on a bike, dogs tend to see you as like not a human for a little bit. They get like confused because he was acting
Yeah.
like
It's like a
I've
hybrid of a
run
human.
into this dog before. I've run into this dog before, and he's very sweet, but
Hmm.
he was acting like I was a bear or something. He was like, "I will not come close to you."
Yeah. Yeah. Well. Luckily, he was peaceful enough. You're still here.
Yeah.
You made it to the pod. I made it to the pod.
Yes, and
I
now we
found
can talk about the Colts, which honestly, there's not a ton going on with the Colts right now. The Colts they've completed their
which is
draft.
why we're talking about dogs jumping out of bushes.
Yes, exactly. We're in this part of the off season now. They just finished rookie minicamp. They just finished rookie minicamp. I have some observations out of that. They did not go very hard in rookie minicamp from a practice perspective. The practices I saw, um, I think there's probably some reason behind that. If you remember, I think Shane Steichen might have mentioned this in his press conference, but if you remember last year, they had a lot of early rookie injuries, during the offseason period. Um, Will Mallory broke his foot. It's Daniel Scott, right?
Yep.
I don't. Who's Daniel Thomas? Why is that in my head? Did Daniel
I
Thomas
think
play?
you're combining Daniel Scott and Rodney Thomas into one person.
I'm doing something.
I don't know who Daniel Thomas is.
Daniel Scott tore his ACL. Juju Brents got hurt at this point last year, right? Or no, he was out. He was out with
he
his
was
wrist.
sitting out with a wrist injury. He
Yeah,
got
he was out
injured
with his wrist.
again.
Daniel
Like
Thomas plays safety for the Jaguars. Why that was in my head, I don't know.
You're just always drawn to Jacksonville. What can you say?
And then, but there were other. When did Josh Downs suffer? When did Josh Downs deal with his knee thing? Because that was a lingering thing.
That was OTAs.
Like there was a lot of stuff with the rookie class where early on in the off season, guys were dealing with one thing or the other, and I don't know this for sure. I think that I think there's probably some thought behind that. You know, these guys have come out of these very long training schedules and hard training schedules, and I mean, obviously you train for the season the same way you train for testing, but like you're also not necessarily maxing out as you try to test stuff. Like there's a rest factor that the rookies haven't really gotten, and I think there might be some thought to that as just, you know, maybe we don't push them as hard right away and try to avoid some of what happened last year if we can, in terms of the rookie class being hurt. There's probably another one or two that I can't remember. But yeah, they didn't go very hard. I'm intrigued by a couple of the undrafted free agent stories. Poor Nate stuck here. He's been on the auto racing beat all month, so he doesn't get to know these guys. But I'll just give you the rundown real quick, and I want you to say what sparks your curiosity the most. They have Jason Bean, who is a quarterback at Kansas. He's listed as a quarterback wide receiver. He's never played quarterback before. He's never played wide receiver before. And then they have Trent Penix, who was a running back in high school, recruited at the time by North Carolina running backs coach DeAndre Smith, who's now the Colts running backs coach. And then he played tight end at North Carolina State. And now the Colts want him as a running back again. And they were the only team that wanted him as a running back again. So you've got those guys. You've got Jalen Carlies. Some of the drafted guys are already making position switches. Jalen Carlies is going from going from safety to linebacker. Jalen Simpson was a cornerback, then became a safety, and is now going back to cornerback. So they're doing this with a lot of guys. What one of those descriptions interests you the most?
I mean, it would have to be the guy that they're moving back to running back. Just because they seem to like to do this. They did this with Deion Jackson. Oh, well, some of these guys, I shouldn't say they did it with them. They seem to like guys who have a receiver background who then move to running back. Deion Jackson made that switch, like high school to college, going to Duke. Why am I forgetting his name? Tyler Goodson has also made that same switch. Now it's different is that this guy that they're after now, what's his name again?
Trent Penix.
Yes, Penix.
Which is not confusing never played at all, by the way. It's not confusing at all, and it's not dangerous because Trent Penix's last name is Penn. There are two N's in Penix. It's not dangerous at all to tweet this man's name without tweeting his first name in the state of Indiana, where Michael Penix played for a while. It's not dangerous at all. It doesn't leave me with fear every time I go to tweet.
You say he's never played running back before?
He played running back in high school, and then he played a little bit at North Carolina State. Like his first year, he got like 22 carries, and then after that, it's hard to tell because it's like a sprinkling of carries, a sprinkling of receptions, but he mostly played tight end at North Carolina State. This is the most important thing I can tell you about Trent Penix. His upper legs are massive. Like
Well,
Like
he's a
AJ
grown man
Dillon,
because
AJ Dillon online sensation size thighs.
he spent 6 years in college, so that is grown man strength. It's interesting though is yeah, he got 11 carries throughout that time. Must be gadget plays and whatnot. That's interesting though. He's interesting. You never hear about the tight end to running back switch.
Yeah, it's
So
weird.
it's weird. It's clearly DeAndre Smith. I mean, it obviously goes back to when he was recruiting him and just always saw a different position for him there. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. That's a cross. It's hard to kind of wrap your mind around because he's like 6'3", so
Yeah, he's huge.
that's
He's
not
big
normally
dude.
what you see at running back. I don't know. I would just have to think that based on what they love to do this with like undrafted guys who have receiver-ish backgrounds that they see more as a running back and then put in that like receiver running back that kind of like the replacement for Nyheim Hines type of role. That's like I said, Deion Jackson, Tyler Goodson stood out to them, I think, that way. This just seems a new but different kind of experiment of a guy who they saw as a running back. He played tight end in college, and why not try him again as a running back, even though he's 6'3"? So that's a different way to go about it.
Well, so there's one of the things that stuck out to me because and Penix mentioned this. We actually got Ed Dodds too, which was kind of helpful on some of these guys to get like a different voice on how he sees the players. But one of the interesting things was Penix mentioned like from a pass protection standpoint, like blitzing him is very different than blitzing most like third down backs. Most third down backs are kind of little guys, and Penix is not. Penix is very large.
Yeah.
Also, I think one of the other things that's really interesting to me. This is just a hint from Ed Dodds, but I thought this was really something that I've never thought about with the draft process before, and maybe should have. So he was talking about position changes, and he was talking about Jalen Simpson specifically. And he said that part of the question of like, can this guy play, or can this guy put on weight? Like Jalen Simpson, one of the things with Jalen Simpson is for a safety, his body is not very thick. And so that's part of the reason they're moving him back to corner is they don't think his body is really fit for that, right? So one of the people that they talked to about it is news director of sports performance Mike Minnis. From like hey, do you think this guy can put weight on? How can he put weight on? What will it do to his body? That's a part of the director of sports performance role that I don't think I've ever thought about before.
Yeah, I mean it makes sense though. I mean that's a lot.
Right.
Yeah, his body transformation. It's weird. Sometimes guys can go a few years before they even find out what their position is. You just hope that they hope that they have enough staying power in the league to be able to do that. I mean, I once covered Quandre Diggs going from nickel corner to strong safety to only when he left Detroit becoming a free safety and then a multi-time Pro Bowl free safety. So it can take longer into their careers even than now. So it's like it's one thing that you scratch your head trying to figure out some of these position changes now as a rookie is entering the league. But like I said, sometimes it takes a couple years in those strength and development programs to even find that landing spot. So I don't know. It just kind of speaks to though the experimental nature of the investment that they're putting into these. It's just like it's get guys into a strength program. Well, first get them out there on the field, see what they can do, see some of the flashes of their individual skills, and then for the ones they want to keep around through the summer, and if they can find their way to keep on a practice squad or once in a while on the roster into the regular season, it's seeing like how they take off in the weight room and how they take off then as football players. The interesting thing, though, that the Colts do, just looking down the line, I think why they really have an eye on these sort of like guys they want to develop who like don't really have an easy plan for yet, is that when you get into the season, Shane Steichen loves to run what he calls like a competition phase in practice. It's like the final 8 or so plays of every practice. They take practice squad players and they put them into the actual Colts playbook. So they're no longer imitating the opposing team. They are now running the schemes of that team. And usually in the course of doing that in training camp and then into early in the season, they tend to catch certain guys catch their eye. And one of the guys last year who did this was Ronnie Harrison. When they asked him how about a position change, a guy who spent I think it was 5 or 6 years as a starting strong safety for a lot of that period of time, started playoff games. The league kind of was not very interested in him anymore as a strong safety. They want to experiment with linebacker, and it was through that competition phase that they ended up finding him as spot as a linebacker. And all of a sudden, he's starting at linebacker at least in base late in the season, and then he filled in at strong safety. So they're trying to find those type of players, and they're putting them on this like elongated elevation path of where they just believe like, will they be able to see it? Well, if the guy can stick around long enough, if he can earn it in the film room and the weight room first, to stick around long enough to get in the practice for those competition settings, they trust their ability to kind of see that as it plays out. So I think there's more and more guys. I think Ronnie Harrison kind of inspired them a little bit. Jalen Carlisle's that pick is kind of all in that mind frame. It's all about, they're going to throw some darts and see what they hit.
Yeah, I think one of the other things with the position change is just you think about one of the most important things that for the Colts is athleticism. They cared so deeply about getting athletic prospects. Well, one of the ways to get more athletic prospects is to get guys who are athletic enough to play other positions at a different point in their career. Yes, it's unsurprising that Bernhard Raimann has great feet for a left tackle because he was fast enough to play collegiate tight end. There's other EJ Speed. EJ Speed was a wide receiver at Tarleton for a while. These guys are athletic enough to do this other stuff, and so then you get them to play, the position a different position for them. They're very athletic for that position. Same thing with like Carlisle. Carlisle is probably the best example of this. He's a safety. So when Gus Bradley was talking to us about the vision for him, it was, hey, we know that this guy can handle the pass coverage stuff. Like we know he can do the pass coverage stuff that's hard to teach linebackers already.
He started as a corner.
Yeah. So the Colts thinking there is we know that he can do that stuff. Richard Smith can teach him to play in the box. Richard Smith can teach him to take on blocks and play at the line of scrimmage and stuff like that and play the way a linebacker would. It's harder to teach some of these bigger, thicker, prototypical college, like traditional linebackers to play coverage than it is to just say, hey, you're a safety who's built for this. Let's put on some muscle and we'll teach you to do the rest, So that's part of it is you get the athleticism you need in the NFL from these spots. Is part of the thinking with some of these. The position change stuff is really interesting. Like Jason Bean, the quarterback from Kansas, he's very fast. Ed Dodd said that the Colts believe he plays faster than his timing, which is an interesting thing. Obviously, the Colts have Ballard there, so there's some extra there. But like the quarterback to receiver / return man path, like that's pretty well trod over the years. It's something that people have looked at for a while in terms of quarterbacks who maybe can't play quarterback at the next level. Now, Jason Bean still wants to make his name as a quarterback. I want to say that up front. But it's going to be difficult for him, given that he's an undrafted free agent. So what he wants more than anything is to make the roster. This has been a way that guys have made rosters in the past, is making the transition from quarterback to wide receiver. Like the first one that jumps in my mind, because you and I went to Missouri, is Brad Smith. But like from an Indiana perspective, Antoine Randall, the Saints obviously have Taysom Hill doing 17 positions at once. Like there's a lot of examples of guys like this. And so that position change, I think quarterback to wide receiver is almost like the easiest one. It's the one that makes the most sense. Is you've got these athletic quarterbacks, maybe they're not the best throwers, you move them to wide receiver.
Yeah, and the fact that they have just an understanding of working with wide receivers, and seeing it now from the other perspective of how do you become a receiver for your quarterback. I've talked to a lot of guys over the years who've done that. I think the kick return element to it is going to be interesting to watch too, because now that's changed in the NFL. There's more spots, there's more opportunities, there's more need for those guys. And so you may be a guy who transitions from quarterback to wide receiver or tight end to wide receiver, something like that, where you're behind, the other veterans you're competing with as far as ever seeing playing time as a wide receiver, but you can find it or earn a roster spot purely through what you can do as a return man. And now there's more than just one guy a team's going to look to be our one return man. There's multiple spots out there. So you look at in its own way, like you look at the path of like Ashton Doolin, he's started to become a guy who can play some wide receiver, but he made it as a small school guy from a college that doesn't even have a football program anymore in Malone, because he was a special teamer. He was just a jaw-dropping gunner. And now there's one more avenue on special teams for guys to hit the ground that way. So it's cool in that way. One of the coolest things we get to watch is those guys who come out of nowhere and find roster spots. And now I think this will open up the new kick return rules, open up a little bit more of a avenue for that, because it's almost impossible for these guys, almost any of these guys, to factor into the actual depth chart early on. What they need is a foot in the door and to be able to be there and develop in the strength program. And eventually there's an injury and they get their opportunity to play. That's sort of been Ashton Doolin as a wide receiver. They need to be able to stick through special teams. And I think that's only going to help that wide receiver return man prototype, especially if they're switching positions.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that stuck out, I went and found something from Ballard from the last day of the draft, but he was talking about some of the decisions they make on day 3. I think it probably applies to the undrafted free agent. Like they're always talking about, how does this guy make it to Sunday? Can this guy make it to Sunday? Can he be active for us in one way or the other? Now there are some guys who I think are developmental, like Jake Witt. Some of those like 7th round offensive linemen are more developmental, and maybe you're not thinking about how can they make it to Sunday, but you are thinking about how can they make it to Sunday eventually, like down the road. What spot can this person play? And so that's part of it, is just, can you do different stuff with this person? Can they, like in terms of like a quarterback, wide receiver, I think one of the other things that helps now is there's so much jet action and sweep stuff and so much different like backfield stuff that offenses do with their receivers. That's kind of more like the way quarterbacks run than maybe 20 years ago. There was a point in NFL offenses where they were like, oh, let's get this guy and we're just going to put him in the wildcat. That's what we're going to do with him. That's our whole thing. And offenses are generally, I think offenses are generally better and more creative with how they're doing things now. And so I think there's more avenues for those guys to get on the field. And it's just how can this guy help the roster? How can he be somewhere on Sunday for us? Either whether it's a spot thing, because they have the elevations from the practice squad. Sometimes you have spot things because of injury, or is there a role for him that's bigger going forward? Like you said, like Doolin. Like Doolin first got on the team as a gunner, and then his offensive role evolved from there.
Yeah, as a guy who grew up watching Josh Cribbs, I just wish we could have seen him in a real offense with real coaches who did something other than say, hey, you're just Wildcat guy in an offense. Yes. Because he was that story. He was a quarterback at Kent State who became one of the most prolific return men we've seen. And he ended up having flashes as a wide receiver, but we never got to see an actual role for him. And There's another guy I covered that I kind of thought about that too. His name was Jamal Agnew in Detroit. And finally, when he got to Jacksonville, they finally turned him into more of that gadget receiver. And he was really good there. And that was actually with Jim Bob Cooter, kind of reunited from Detroit to Jacksonville, kind of got a second shot to figure him out. But it is like that transition has happened more just in the past. I don't know. It just seems like ever since I mean, Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel have kind of become kings of creating positionless football on offense. And that is just kind of opening the minds a little bit more. And I think Shane Steichen's a guy who we didn't necessarily see him with guys who don't have a position yet, or like it hasn't been that out of the box, but it has been, he has found unique ways to use certain players already. We've just, I think the way that, deploying Josh Downs as more of a down the field receiver, we didn't see that in college. He saw something else in him. I think just the different roles he had for his tight ends based on what their skill sets were. That was the most hodgepodge unit you could have ever imagined. And yet collectively they put up as a group more than 800 yards. Like they ended up producing like a tight end one in so many different ways. So I could see getting him more players that you can just sort of like, once you get enough reps out there in either that competition phase or in training camp and whatnot, even if you can find him just a few plays, he seems like a guy who's going to be able to unlock that in some of these players. And so I think it makes sense to throw as many darts as you can just to see maybe a couple of these guys stick. And if they have even one trait that's yet to be uncovered, bet on Shane Steichen to be the coach to uncover that.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think, Shane doesn't like to reveal a lot of stuff. In fact, this will make you laugh because you've heard him and me do this so many times now. But I asked him what the vision was for guys like Penix and Bean, and his initial answer was, "Well, I can't tell you that." The ongoing Joel fishing for stuff or directly asking for it, and Shane not giving it to me it carries into the offseason as well.
There you go.
But I think him and Jim Bob Cooter is another one that, like they've said, Reggie Wayne has said, like Shane wants guys who do different things. He wants a lot of different guys with different strengths. He doesn't want two players who do the same thing in the offense because I think he wants options. Shane wants lots and lots and lots of options. So this isn't somebody who's undrafted or making a position switch, but like some of the conversations that I've had over the last couple of days about AD Mitchell are the Colts see him as bringing something. Reggie Wayne specifically sees him as he's got something to his game that nobody else does in the Colts wide receiver room with the way he moves. Like I think the way Reggie put it, I don't have this typed out. I'm not right in front of me, but I think he put it like some of the way he moves makes Reggie uncomfortable, like watching it. And he said that probably means it makes the defensive back uncomfortable, and it's why he's able to separate at the top of routes and can kind of do more stuff. Like they don't necessarily feel like they have that. Like they think of Alec Pierce as like they really think of Alec Pierce as a deep threat guy now. Like he's a go ball guy. Josh Downs, they're very high on Josh Downs. Reggie's very high on Josh Downs. I'll have something coming in the next week on how he views all the receivers. Then Pittman is obviously the kind of do everything high volume guy, but they feel like there's a separation element at the top of routes. I think that applies to intermediate, short, all of it with AD Mitchell that they don't have. That's kind of what he wants for everything. Is he wants a little bit of difference in everything. Now, I think at running back it's a little bit different because Jonathan Taylor is Jonathan Taylor, and you're going to put him on the field as much as you can. But even just the way they use Tyler Goodson and putting him in as a passing down back, that's not that uncommon in the NFL, but it's just another example of he wants guys who can do he wants a lot of different guys who can do a lot of things, so he can play around with that whenever he has a chance.
Yeah, I mean, if you just think about their running back room last year, I guess it depends on what point in the season we think about it, but like you go from Jonathan Taylor to Zach Moss to a guy like it started out as Evan Hull, and then it was at times Tyler Goodson. Like it's not just that it's like you lose Taylor, you go to a lesser version of it. Those guys were all just like massively different players. Zach Moss was your like grinder type yards after contact just run up the middle type of battering ram. That's not Taylor's style. He's less of the, he's kind of everything but that almost. He's your breakaway. I mean, he's your superstar runner, but he's not like a short yardage guy as much. And then Tyler Goodson.
Taylor's power really, now that you say it, Taylor's power is really once he's got 5 or 6 yards of steam. Yeah. You see it more like once he's into the second level. That's when you see a lot of like because he does have runs where you're like, oh wow, he really pushed the pile there. But now that you say that, it does feel like a lot of those are once he's in the secondary and he's hitting like 2 linebackers at the same time, or linebackers, like it's different than when he's at the line.
Yeah, it's when he hits that top speed at 225 pounds is different. That's why I think they really like what they were looking for in their number 2 runner is that more short yardage, win right in the scrum type of player. That right now is Trey Sermon is his style. I think that if they were going to draft one, it would have been a guy in that mold. And then that third string back is right now it's very, very passing down based. Like we will eventually see if Evan Hull, maybe he can become a runner, but that wasn't so much his background coming out of Northwestern. He averaged less than 6 yards a carry there. And he was built to be a pass protector and a guy who could catch the ball. And another guy whose background is more as a receiver than as a running back. Now that I think about it, he's sort of in that same mold. So that third player they're looking at, that they go for the same guys who are all like receiver turned running back, or in Penix's case, tight end go into running back. That I think speaks to how they aren't necessarily looking for backups who are just like lesser versions of the guys in front of them. They're looking for something distinctly different in those backups. And I think they even remain open-minded to that at quarterback, because that's what having Gardner Minshew behind Anthony Richardson was. And now, granted, they didn't know which quarterback they were going to draft when they signed Gardner, but I think so many of us got in our minds that, like, you just have to have a mobile backup to Anthony. And that just isn't so much the way that Shane boxes himself in, is that he wants to stay kind of open-minded to, like, if we have to go to a backup, we can just roll out this new section of things and do things a little bit differently based around their skill set, which I think to a point is going to happen if they go to Joe Flacco, who maintains some of Anthony's characteristics as like an aggressive, or as a, big armed vertical quarterback, but he's obviously not a mobile quarterback at all. And they didn't force that there either. So it does seem like they want as much versatility as possible. And I think you see that with really those top 4 wide receivers are going to sum that up, where like A.D. Mitchell to me is sort of like a blend of what's missing between Josh Downs and Alec Pierce, as far as some of that natural, just like that. He's got more size than Josh Downs, but he's got more change of direction than Alec Pierce. Whereas Pierce is better as a straight line speed guy. Downs is better as a sort of like, I would imagine we'll see when AD's out there, but Josh Downs right now looks incredibly advanced as far as a guy who can lay out, catch, track the football, just a guy who sees the ball into his hands in incredible ways. And A.D. Mitchell is something in between all of that, and he's different than Pittman too, who's more of your, bully contested catch guy. So I think as many of those different traits as you give that to Shane, and you can sort of build those roles out with Jim Bob Cooter. And I'm glad you brought up Jim Bob, because that's what so much of this is. It's Shane's offense, but it's like, well, what's Jim Bob Cooter's job? He's not calling the plays. He really hones in on these roles sometimes and gets them really refined to the point where you can expand those within those limited skill set segments of the playbook. And I think that was big for Josh Downs last year. So it'll be interesting to watch as they continue to populate these rooms with different skill sets.
Yeah, there's an element of the entire Colts operation. It might be like this in other cities too. I've only covered the Saints and the Colts, and the Colts have kind of always been like this. I think it's part of the way Ballard sets it up. With us getting to talk to the scouts a lot, and him talking about like which scouts did something. Ed Dodds was doing the same thing, where he threw out, Andrew Hoyle was somebody who saw Penix as a running back, that kind of thing. Like, there's a collaborative element to the Colts that wasn't present when I covered the Saints. Like, the Saints was Sean's vision. There was Sean Payton, and that's pretty much it. Like, if a personnel move happened, it was Sean. If it was, if they were using a player a certain way, it was Sean. The Colts are not like that, even with even looking at it from a um, like Shane, I think very obviously like knows a ton about offense, and his brain is always working that way, and he's always thinking. But I also think Shane likes to be stretched and to find a bunch of other stuff, and wants everyone to kind of have an input. Like I know, like even with the offensive line coach, like some of that is like, how are you going to block this stuff? Like how do we block this opponent? That kind of thing. He wants to hear. So like it is Shane's offense, but there is a collaborative element to this staff from GM through the coaches that kind of comes through a lot right now in the offseason when they're talking a little bit more about how they see players and how they ended up bringing these players to Indianapolis.
Yeah, I think you see that with how the trust levels they give certain assistant coaches, and when they really pound the table for a draft prospect, that has started to show that it matters. This year, it was Matt Goncalves in the third round. Like when they made that pick, they trade up for him. It was a little bit of a head scratcher to us, just because it was a guy they were going to move positions to. It didn't feel like it fit a big need. It was a trade up, which they not a big trade up, but they don't do a lot of those. And but they said that just like they felt like he was a total tone setter for their room, and that Tony Soprano Jr. was just all about him, and they have learned to really trust Tony Soprano Jr. because of the success he had last year, getting the most out of the entire group. And the year before, they did this with Reggie Wayne, who at the combine was just so blown away by Josh Downs, he thought he was a first-round caliber wide receiver. And at the time, Josh Downs didn't fit anything that Chris Ballard ever drafts as far as height and weight, but it forces them to look a little bit more at him because they really trusted Reggie, because Reggie has played at a Hall of Fame level in the NFL. And they were, he was coming off a year that they were impressed by what he did, even in the chaos of the 2022 season. And then that one obviously has worked out really well. So it is a little different here, where it's a balance between, like, Chris Ballard is a very established GM as far as the time he's put in here, the systems he has. Some of his ways are, too rigid for many people, but we are seeing a little bit of like, there is a collaborative element to how they're going to build this out entirely, and they're sometimes going to go away from certain norms but usually there's usually a reason for it. It was like when they draft Matt Goncalves, and we're a little unsure of how that fits the puzzle. When they take a small wide receiver like Josh Downs, there's an easy explanation after the draft, or at least a clean explanation for, this coach was this dead set on him, and we trust him to find a vision for him. And it worked with Josh Downs. And so you can see how that can pay off sometimes. But it is different because, like, when my last team I covered was the Lions, and everything was Patriot way. You either fit the way that Bill Belichick would have drafted a guy, or you're not coming here. And so this is a little different than that.
Yeah. It's always fun talking to Dodds too. By the way, I'm just going to throw something out here real fast. Axes are fun. Toy axes in the draft room are fun. Ed Dodds made me think of this. And May in the NFL is a time for fun stories. So the 2 or 3 of you in the world who were really upset that I wrote about why Ed Dodds had an axe in the draft room, lighten up.
Like, of all things to get mad about right now.
Come on. It was 250 words on an axe.
You wasted so much of their time that they had to take more time to write out an email to you. Let you know that.
Like, I think and would say that between Nate and I think we do a pretty good job of covering just about every angle you can think of with the Colts, especially the serious stuff and trying to analyze stuff. Like, this is still a sport. It's still fun. Like, it should be fun. the scouting staff having a turnover chain essentially, because that's basically what the axe is. It's a turnover chain. Like Ed gives the axe to whoever had like a player in the draft room or whatever. That's fun. This is fun.
Yeah,
I don't care what Herman Boone said on Remember the Titans. This is football. It's fun. If you're watching it, it's supposed to be fun. Listen, I understand. I am a sports fan too. I get it. You want your team to win. You want all those things. But for the love of Pete, it is May. Axes are fun. Chill out.
Save your anger for the fall. There will be plenty of things, real things to vent about.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fine to be mad about those things, but like, man, the fact that they are people who have inside jokes in the office.
You know what? We need to just assign homework to people. You need to come up with your own football things that bring you joy, because they're out there. Trust me.
Yeah,
there are fun things in the game.
So, like, honestly, the X thing, like, obviously, that's not like a super intense story or anything like that. But like, I kept seeing you guys ask about what was going on with the X in the draft room on Twitter, and I went and looked and found it in the gallery where you guys found it, and I was like, oh, we get Ed Dodds. I can ask him a dumb question about the X and get him laughing. And he gave an answer about what it was, and I had your answer. I had the answer for the people who are interested. If you're not interested, don't read the story. Read the other story that posted that day about AD Mitchell and how there's much more to him than just being mad about being taken 52nd. Like, that was the serious story you wanted. And then if you're a person who, has fun sometimes when you watch sports, you can read the X story.
Hey, not everyone appreciates investigative journalism, like finding out what the toy X was. So
I do think that there's a danger with AD Mitchell, and we'll probably end the podcast here. I can hear people in the background of Nate's closet.
The interrogation's starting.
But I do think it's important with AD Mitchell. Like, there's so much of the story, because of the way his career started, is going to be about him dropping in the draft. He picked the number for the number of guys drafted ahead of him. Like, and we have this tendency to reduce guys to one thing. Like, this guy is way more than just one thing. Like, this is somebody who found out he had diabetes when he was 16. Dealing with that is not easy. I don't have it, but I have family members who do. It's not the easiest thing to learn to do. And he actually sounds like he's pretty much kind of has an idea where he's going now. That was in the story I wrote the other day. He has a daughter. That's his primary motivation. His primary motivation is not falling in the draft. His primary motivation is his daughter, who's turning 3 this summer. Like, I think that's one of the other things is just, I think that's probably what Nate and I would say our favorite thing to do is tell people's stories in a way that inspire other people. That's kind of what got both of us into this business. And so, like, I think that's one of the things to remember is, there is this piece of AD Mitchell that's upset about where he was drafted, frustrated by it. But there's also a part of him that's not really the most important thing in his life either way. It's not the hardest thing that's ever happened to him. It's not his biggest motivation. And so just I thought I really liked him. I really liked him. I got a chance to talk to him for 4 or 5 minutes by myself the other day. I really like it. Was a good first impression. You never know. I mean, from these things, like it's his first time talking to reporters or whatever in his new city. But yeah, I really liked it. I really liked him in my first face-to-face conversation.
Yeah, what's fun is getting to know these guys and seeing that play out. And we're going to see so many things test those personalities, whether like how they handle success, how they handle failure. We've seen a little taste of how he handles doubt, but that's not going to go, like, there's going to be more of that. And also, these people evolve. People are different. Like Michael Pittman Jr., I've written a lot about how he has evolved as a person as he's gotten a few years in the league and gone from 1 kid to 2 kids. And this is a fun time though to get to know these rookies and get to know them beyond what that viral clip is that defines them. And last year I got to do that with Josh Downs, who everyone knew from, him crying on the video when he got the call. But, I got to sit down with him for a while and find out that this guy's also got a real kind of cutting edge to him too. And so there usually is a lot more of these people than what we see initially. And that's my favorite part of the job is bringing that to light and seeing the way that so much of this season is going to test that in all of them. And with AD Mitchell, I mean, it could go a lot of different ways from this point forward. I really don't know as far as like what the stat line and how early he's involved and all that. It could go a lot of different ways. He could be the starting receiver this year. He could be the number 2, maybe. Probably not. Probably number 3 is the ceiling in terms of production, but number 2 outside guy. Or it could take longer. Maybe he's not there yet. Either way, it's going to be so many ups and downs across 17 weeks. Also, we'll see like the way that injuries test players and the way that success. Maybe the Colts win 12 games. Maybe they disappoint and they don't. How do they deal with that? Like, we're going to learn so much more about these guys than anything from a Zoom call or anything we learned pre-draft really is going to tell us. And that's kind of the exciting thing is like these guys are at the absolute top of the top of their sport. And I think it ends up revealing things that they don't even know about themselves yet. And seeing them learn that's one of my favorite parts of the job.
Yeah. So we're like we said, this is, I mean, I think you guys know this. We know, it's a quieter time of the year for this Colts team. At some point we'll get a chance to talk to Anthony Richardson. It's going to be when he's on the field. I shouldn't say when he's on the field. It's going to be when we can see him on the field. That's the biggest thing is that's going to be when we talk to Anthony. There'll be some stuff from that, but obviously you guys are going to want to see it. But we're kind of just getting to know this draft class, getting to know this Colts team. The schedule comes out. We're taping this on Wednesday because Nate's chasing drivers at the track. We're taping this on Wednesday afternoons. The schedule hasn't come out. The schedule is going to come out. There will be lots of information there for those of you who are, on the road, who want to go to games on the road. Lot of good destinations. I will say that. I think on the next podcast we'll put on the schedule a little bit and maybe we'll try to rank the destinations because this is a strong destination schedule.
We'll see if anybody can upset Jacksonville at number 1. That'll be a debate we saved to next week. No spoilers.
I think everybody who listens to this podcast regularly knows which one is going to occupy the bottom spot in my list.
And the Colts list too, because they don't ever win there.
I know. It puts me like I think this is the thing that me and the Colts might be the most in agreement on is that Jacksonville is a whole. And no one should go there.
Well, you're going to have to go there.
Yeah, I know, but I shouldn't have to. That's the most important part. And I'm not going to like it. That's the other piece. And I'm probably going to try to leave as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Man, the schedule's not even out yet, and I'm taking shots at Jacksonville. This is great.
I'm just getting you wound up you gotta start writing here very soon. I'm just getting you wound up. Get all those takes out tonight.
That's true, because I can't it would be funny if every year when the schedule came out, my column was just it's disgusting that Jacksonville's in the NFL and that I have to go there.
You could pre-write that and be done before the schedule's out.
At some point, Jaguars fans are going to know that I keep saying all this stuff and it's going to be bad in my mentions. But I don't care.
And for them listening, it's Joel. It's all Joel. His email can be you can go from getting angry emails about an axe to angry emails about Jacksonville.
I have a friend who works he spends a week every month or a week every couple months in Jacksonville, and he swears that it's not as bad as I make it out to be. I keep telling him that he's probably talking about parts of Jacksonville that aren't Jacksonville proper, which is an important distinction to make.
It's true. It's a big place.
So that's a preview for next week. There's a preview for next week. We're gonna rank the destinations while we talk about the schedule. For the Colts Cover-2 Podcast, I'm Joel A. Erickson. This has been Nate Atkins coming to you from IMS, where he might be coming from there for a little while now until the race happens.
This little interrogation might be my new office for the podcast.
Yeah. Maybe we'll just get Nathan Brown in here and I'll just let you guys talk about the race, and I'll just ask dumb questions about, like, what does that mean? How does this work? That kind of thing.
That's right. Well, the Colts rookies are coming out to the track on Friday, so maybe I will actually learn some of them and some of their names, and since I haven't been around them, then I'll be a little sharper next week on the podcast here from IMS.
Okay, so that's it for the Colts Cover-2 Podcast for this week. We'll have another one coming up next week. I hope the schedule falls the way it best does for you. Or by the time you guys are listening to this, fell, because most of you will be hearing this after. Fell the way it worked out best for you guys. Have a good week, guys.